Hello everyone, and welcome to the next installment of our Maple Tales RPG series, where we're going to be using Unity's new input system to set up a character so that we've got somebody we can walk around our little island that we made last time. And the first thing you're going to want to do is making sure you've got your assets folder highlighted so that it's easy to drag stuff into it. Navigate to wherever it is you have stored away your Maple Tales assets, or whichever ones it is you're using for your project. You remember that last time we went to the tile sets folder. This time we're going to be going into characters. And here you'll find we've got two characters for you to choose from. We've got the bear and we've got the fox. You will eventually be needing all of the sprites associated with each of them, so you might as well import all of them over in one go. I'm going to be working with the fox, so I'm going to take both of these sprite packs. I'm just going to hold them, drag them down, and then drop them into my assets folder, and then we can get rid of that. They will slowly come over. Here we go. So here we have got our fox with its idle sprites. If I have a look in the sprite editor, that will show them off nice and blurrily for us. And we've also got the walking sprites as well. So remembering from last time how it is that we need to import sprites when we're using them in pixelated art, we need to come over to the inspector, have sprite 2D and UI set. This is still multiple because we can see we've got numerous sprites that we're working with here. We're going to be setting our pixels per unit to 16, and we're going to be setting our filter mode to point and our quality to none down at the bottom. Not no quality, it's just that it's got no compression. Then when we hit apply, we can see that our sprites come through nice and sharply now. We can also see now that Unity has had a go at working out how big it thinks these sprites are, and what it's done is it's combined the two which are above and below each other. So where you can see the blue border here, this is where Unity thinks that sprite should be cut up. So it thinks there's 4, obviously there should be 8. So we need to slice this down a little bit more by coming up to slice up at the top. Then if we take away where it says automatic, go to that drop down, and instead we're going to go with by cell size. We're not using 64 by 64, we're going to go for 16 by 16. And now the red lines are showing us where the new slicing is going to be done. This is now how big the sprites will be. Perfect. So we can hit slice, and then we can go up to the top here and hit apply, so that this now actually is how they get cut up, and we can see by the blue border that our sprites are now the right size. And then we're just going to repeat exactly the same process for the other set of sprites that we've got. These ones are all still blurry and they're still cut up wrong. So we're going with multiple, we're going with 16, we're going with point, and we are compression none. Apply. And then we need to tell it to slice them down properly as well. Usually it's pretty good at remembering what was the last options that you input. So we can see that it's automatically added in cell size 16 by 16. And we can say, yep, slice that up for me, and then apply it. Perfect. And now these can all be selected. One thing to note though is that at the moment we don't actually need them all. These are for setting up the animations a little bit later on. We just need to pick one of them that we can work with for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over to my scene so that I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to go to where I've got my fox idols down at the bottom. And I'm just going to open that up by clicking on the play button that's just on the side, the little triangle that was sticking out. And it's showing us all of our different sprites. From here then, I can pick up one of these sprites and I can drag it into my scene and drop it down. And there he is. Hello little foxy. He is going to be the player character. That being the case then, I'm going to come over to the inspector on the right hand side, and I'm now going to name it player, so that this is easy for us to find later on. And you can see that changing the name up here has automatically changed the name over in the hierarchy on the other side as well. From there then as well, we can have a look at our game view, which is one of the windows that we've got next to the scene. And when we open up that, it'll show us what the camera can currently see, which is not a lot at the moment. The camera is clearly in a slightly unusual position. So if we come back over to the scene and then we zoom out a little bit and we highlight the main camera, come right out of our scene so we can see where it's going to be. And then if you go over here onto the right hand side of the window, this little globe with dots around it, it looks like, tells you whether or not you can see your gizmos. So that's stuff which is effectively going on in the scene, which is going to be highlighted by different symbols. They can become quite cluttersome, which is why it's a good idea to have them not highlighted when you don't need them. For now though, let's just toggle this to be on. Well, and there's the camera. We can see there's its symbol down in the bottom. It is nowhere near where our fox is. So what we can do is we can come over to the left-hand side, select the Move tool, and we're going to move our camera just by holding on to that little blue square in the middle. pick it up and we can see, ooh, there goes the camera around, and we'll just put it somewhere that allows us to see the fox for now. And so now when we go to our game view again, hey, there he is, little fox. Not that we can do anything at the moment, because he's got no controls. He is just a picture sitting on top of a picture at this point. And so we need to build this up to be something that we can call a player that we're able to interact with. If we come and highlight it then in the hierarchy, we can see that Unity has a set of building blocks that it calls components that it adds onto anything that's within itself. Effectively, whether it's the camera, whether it's the tile map, you can see it's all got these building blocks over in our inspector that it can show us. Highlighting the player again then, we can see we've got a transform, effectively where is it, how big is it rotated from its original, and it's also got a sprite renderer because it's a sprite. It's a sprite that we dragged in, and the sprite renderer is what is allowing us to see it. In order for us to have any effect on this little foxy guy though, we are going to need to add a rigid body to him. So if we come down to add component, and we're going to search for a rigid body, remembering that we are working on a 2D game, so you're going to want rigid body 2D, you can see that this is now giving us more options of how we can work with our fox. Now, one thing that you will notice is that it has a gravity scale. Fantastic if you're working in a platformer or something where you want things to react to gravity, but if at this point in time I come over to our little play button up at the top, what we'll find is that because the floor is not technically solid, there he goes, it's just a picture, the fox is going to fall off, because he's got nothing to stand on. This doesn't actually exist, it is literally just an image. So if we just hit the stop button, and so our little fox, we don't want him to react to gravity, we can just put 0 in there. We want to be able to move him ourselves, we don't want him to move of his own accord at this point. And now, because we're going to be having absolute control over our character, it's not like he's going to be jumping or falling or anything, we can ignore the rest of the inputs into the rigid body. But at this point we still can't control him. For that we're going to be needing the input system. If you're in Unity 6, like I am, you'll likely find the input system is already sitting there ready and waiting for you to use it. If you are not in Unity 6, you're probably going to have to input it yourself. And to do that, you can come over to the window up at the top, open that up and go down to Package Management and then go to the Package Manager. That will bring up all of the different bits and pieces of package that you can bring into Unity. We can already see there's the input system there, which I have already got installed. If you need to look for it though, just search for it, not within your own project, look in Unity Registry, input. Whoops, helps if we spell put correctly. And then you'll see the input system there and you'll be able to install it from there. But as I say, Unity 6, you should already have it. We can just close down the package manager and then we're going to come back over to our player. Because what we're going to do is we're going to add another component onto him. We're going to add the player input system. So if we just type in player, here it comes up with player input, and we can just click on that in order to load this onto our new little guy. If you're finding this is a little bit of a pain scrolling down these, you can close down these windows to give yourself a little bit more space. There we go, so now we can just see our player input system. And from here then, we can see that the player input is asking us for a little bit more information about what our game is going to be doing. So under the default scheme, what it's effectively asking here is, where are you going to be outputting your game to? Is it going to be a PC game, in which case keyboard and mouse bindings are going to be more important to you? Or are you going to be doing mobile gaming? Is it touchpads? Is it going to be using a controller? Is it a gamepad? So you can see here, Unity is trying to pick up what kind of inputs you're looking for. Most likely thing is, you're either going to be aiming for all of them, or you've got no idea which one you're going for. Either way, stick with any for now. And what that means, as we can see where the auto switch is, if you plugged in a joystick, you'd be able to use it with the game because it will automatically switch to accepting those inputs. Next then, we can see we've got the default maps. So this is Unity's default ideas of what it thinks you're going to want to do. So if we look at the drop down, we can see it's got a default map of player inputs and a default map for UI inputs. Obviously, we're going to be choosing player in this instance. Because we're not working with the UI, we can ignore the input module, and we're going to be setting up the camera separately so we can ignore that one as well. In terms of behavior, so that's what this component is going to be doing, we will be setting that one up afterwards. That needs to be done after we have written the script, really. For now then, we're just going to come down to where it says Open Input Settings. This will open up your project settings so that you can see the global settings of what's going on within your game effectively. And if we come over to the right hand side, we can see we've got the input system package. We can have a look at that and see exactly what bindings Unity is now doing. So this is what it is looking out for whenever you're doing something with your player or your UI. Obviously, we're working with the player at this point. So we can see it's got automatic bindings for attacking things, crouching, jumping, sprinting, or just moving around, as we're going to be doing in our game for now. If we go to the drop down then, we can see what keys it is automatically binding. So you can see the gamepad's in there, we've got a joystick in there as well, again because we're working with any, so it's trying to look for any input. And it's also got the most common key bindings that you would see. So up being the W key, up also being the arrow key. It's looking for both. You'll be able to work with both when you're playing the game. You don't have to keep these as they are. You can change them. So if we have a look at the W key, highlight that one, then come over to the right hand side, we can see at the moment under its bindings, so that's what key is attached to this action is a binding. We can see that the path is currently the W key. We can go to the drop down on this, and Unity will listen for if we want to input a different key binding. Obviously, that's not necessarily a very good idea. It's pretty standardized for how you move players these days, but if your game calls for it to be changed, then you can. For now, though, we're just going to stick with the defaults because that's what people generally expect. It also doesn't matter that Unity is looking for inputs for other things. So, for example, if we open the jump, it's looking for a spacebar input in order to make the character jump, because, as we're going to see in just a second, just because it's looking for these bindings, we're still going to need an actual script for it to tell it what to do. So let's get that one done. Let's close down our project settings, and we're going to come down to Add Component down at the bottom. And this time, if you go right down to the bottom, you can see New Script. We'll click on that one, and we're going to name our script Player Movement. Something which is going to be memorable to yourself to know what this script is about. Don't have to call it player movement, that's what I'm going with. We'll create that and we will add that onto our player. It'll ask you where you want to save it, so we're in the assets folder at the moment, and I don't really want to just stick it in there with those two. We will create a nice new folder for it to live in, which we will call scripts. There we go, and so we'll save that into there. From there then, back in Unity, we can see that the scripts folder has been created in our assets. We can double click on that. There's the little script that we've made, and then we can double click on that to open it up. Once it's opened up in whichever of your script editing software you're using, I'm using Visual Studio, we'll be able to start writing it. And the first thing we're going to need to do is add in a few variables that we're able to work with. First variable we'll have then is going to be a private rigid body 2D. So that's going to give us access to the rigid body that we've already attached to our player, and we're just going to name it RB. Next, we're going to add in another private variable, this time a vector2. So this is going to be a representation of the position of where our player is. That's what we're wanting to change, and we're just going to call that movement input, because effectively that's what we're doing. We want it to move, and we want it to be an input. Next then, we'll add in another private variable. This time it's going to be a float, so it's going to be a number, and we're going to call it player speed, because if we're going to be changing the location, we need to know how quickly we're going to be doing that. So the first line we need to add in then is going to be in our start function. This is what the script will do pretty much as soon as it is in existence. It will run the code which is in the start, and we need to tell it which rigid body we're actually working with. So we're telling RB, you need to get a component from the same object that the script is attached to, and the component you're going to be getting hold of is going to be rigid body 2D. So effectively, RB is now going to be able to control the rigid body that is attached to the player. Next then, in our update function, so this is the function that the script is going to call every single frame. Effectively, the game will be endlessly looking to see if there's a change that's been going on here. And what we need to do is we need to tell our rigid body that it will be changing its linear velocity. So this is its position over time, effectively moving. And you're going to do that by whatever input we give you. And you're going to go at the speed that we're going to define in player speed. So basically, change where you are according to the direction that we say, and you're going to do it this quickly. Next then, we need to define what this movement input is so that we're actually able to work with it, and Unity knows what on earth we're on about. For that, we're going to create a function, which is going to be a public void, because this is something that we need to be able to access outside of this script, but it doesn't need to return a specific value. We're going to call it movePlayer, because that's what we're doing. And then we're going to tell the input system that we are inputting an action, and because this works with contexts, we're telling it that that's what it's going to be receiving. What you'll notice as well is that you should have had input system automatically put in at the top so that we're able to use that within the script. If not, you can just type that in manually. And so back in our function, we can say that move input is a context, so we're working with the input system and it's changing vector2. So effectively, move input is part of the input system and we're changing where we are. It's a movement. And then the last thing we now need to change about this script is that we can see that we're changing our player speed, but we haven't said what we actually want our speed to be. And in all honesty, at this point, we don't really know because we haven't been working within the game itself. So what we need to do is we need to be able to change our player speed, but we don't want anything else to be able to change it. So what we need to do is we need to make this into a serializable field. And we do that by adding serialize field in square brackets just in front of where we put private float before. So effectively now, this is something we will be able to see in Unity itself. So we can save this, and then we can head on back to Unity. And back in Unity, there's a couple of bits and pieces we still need to do. Firstly, if we come back to our player, we can see that our player input system is still trying to send messages, and that's not what we want it to do. So if we click on the drop-down, we need to invoke Unity events instead. That way what we're able to do is get it to talk to the script that we have just written. So if we come and drop down on our events, now you can see at the moment there's nothing there, and this is a weird little thing about Unity. Sometimes you do have to click away. We go to the grid, and then we'll come back again, drop down on the events. Aha, that's what we wanted to see, player and UI. So here's the player that we're working with. At the moment, move, so any sort of movement that we're doing is not got anything in there, so it doesn't know we can move yet. But what we can do is we can click the plus button so that we're able to add objects and scripts to it. Now we want it to look at the player, so we'll grab hold of our player and we'll drag and drop that into this box. And now what we can do is we can access all of the functions and the scripts that we have added onto the player. So if we have a look at the function box, we can find our player movement script. And then we can find the move player function that we wrote. Click on that, and now these are able to talk to each other. So now the input system knows we have written a move callback script, and it's in here. It's on the player. This is where you need to look for it. So if we now have another look at our script down at the bottom, remembering that we set the speed, but we didn't actually give it a number. At the moment it's at 0, and well, 0 is not going to move us very fast. We'll set it to 2. That'll do for now. Right, let's have a little look-see. We play our game. Can we move Foxy around? Hey, there he goes, off on a nice little walk. I guess he's walking crab side, walking sideways, walking back. He is up, he is running, he is moving. Woo! And the last little thing I want to change, if we just stop the game from running, is at the moment we are on free aspect, which is a little bit random. It's kind of not really setting the scale of the game to what we want it to be. This is going to be an HD game, so we'll just come down to full HD and select that. And now everything will be more in the scale that is expected by people. If you're finding that your images look a little bit blurry, and we can see here that our little fox isn't quite symmetrical on either side, what you can as well do is just set the scale to be 1. This has zoomed us way in, but that's fine. We'll be setting up the camera next time, so we'll be able to change this to something a little bit more sensible. But there we go. That is how you work with Unity's input system, so that you're able to create a character that you can move around. Yeah. Off you go, little fox, go for a walk. Now though, with our input set up so that we can move around, next we can get some animations sorted out so that he's not looking like quite such a static little fox, and he's actually going to be able to walk around the world and look more like a living character. But I hope you've enjoyed this little video. Have fun making your own game, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye!